Augusta was just showcased to be coming in the Wuthering Waves version 2.6 update, and I'm not gonna lie to you, she looks incredible. So after the recent showcases, people are probably more interested in her, and are probably wondering if they should be going for Augusta or not. That's what I'm going to be talking about in this video, by discussing Augusta's biggest pros and cons. The first thing I wanted to talk about is that as an Electro DPS, she blows all of the competition completely out of the water. I've discussed plenty of times on this channel why having DPSs of different attributes is pretty beneficial to your account. And thanks to the new Whimpering Wastes having spectral resistance on both sides, it's now more beneficial than ever before to really diversify your account to make sure you're able to deal with any type of content, no matter what it resists. So getting a DPS for every single attribute is honestly not a bad idea anymore. And when it comes to Electro DPSs, Augusta, Shengliao, and Colcharo are your only options. And let's be real here, Augusta is going to completely annihilate the other two in terms of electro damage performance. Colcharo is not that hot in terms of damage, only really being utilized by some insane sweat speedrunners who manage to get 4 Death Messengers consistently in their rotations. Or just people who think Colcharo is cool. But Colcharo isn't going to get you a consistent clear if you're not really good at the game. And then for Shengliao, while he doesn't have the difficulty issue that Colcharo has, he also doesn't really have the damage that Augusta is gonna have. The Generation 2 characters like Frolova and Zani have all just been straight up better than their Generation 1 counterparts. So saying that Augusta is going to be the new best Electro DPS in the game is not exactly a very bold take. But Shengliao is someone who had a lot of respect in the community for being a free character, so I feel it is important to specify that Augusta is going to completely dog-walk this dude when it comes to performance in both Tower and Whimpering Wastes. Then for my next point, if simply having higher damage output than Shengliao was not enough, let's also talk about the fact that unlike Shengliao, she has plenty of teammate options, both 4-star and 5-star. For the first time in a long time, we see another Shorekeeper user, thank the lords, because I was kinda getting tired of all these characters who don't use Shorekeeper. I got her S2, I want to use my S2 Shorekeeper. But that beside the point, being a Shorekeeper user automatically opens up the other generic healers from Baija and Varina. So that gives you 3 good slots when it comes to your third teammate. But when it comes to your sub DPS, Augusta also has a pretty good amount of options. 3 in particular that I wanted to discuss. The first is Yuno. She definitely seems to be the new premier heavy attack buffer, and considering that she is a 5-star, she's most likely going to have a very large damage output as well. But until we get more details about Yuno's kit, I am not really going to be discussing her much in depth, because I'd rather get the descriptions of her abilities in-game before I really start making opinions on her. So let's focus on the other 2 characters, shall we? Being Mortefi and Frolova. These are both heavy attack buffing characters that specialize in different things. Mortefi hyper buffing your Augusta, and then Frolova doing an absolute crap ton of damage of her own. I don't really need to elaborate much on Frolova's damage output. We all know it at this point. We've all seen it. Even in teams where she gets absolutely minimal buffing, like in GN teams or in Phoebe teams, Frolova was still able to show her performance, and that she doesn't need to be hyper buffed in order to get good damage output. So Frolova Augusta should honestly speak for itself. And honestly, same goes for Mortefi. Mortefi was the quintessential heavy attack buffer, most likely will stay this way until Yuno arrives. And Mortefi also just has an absolute ton of buffs that are not within his Ultra skill. He still has his S6, he's still running Empyrean Anthem, and he still has Static Mist. He just has so many buffs to his name that other characters cannot compete with. So Mortefi and Frolova definitely seem to be the best in slot characters when it comes to running Augusta before Yuno. And seeing that one of these characters is a 4-star makes me happy, because ever since the Zani Phoebe incident, I've been scared that DPSs are going to need 5-star teammates, but thank the lords that it hasn't been as bad as I previously thought. Time to talk about the next point, which is that Augusta seems to have a ridiculous amount of movement in her abilities. Now why is this important? Well, Augusta is a melee DPS, and melee DPS characters always have this kind of fear to where if you are not close to the enemy, you're kind of wasting your rotation time and wasting your buff up time. So you need a good way to chase bosses if they decide to run away from you. Xiangliao and Zani drag themselves across the floor whenever they're using their abilities. Chongli literally teleports. So yeah, I think it is kind of important to have some kind of way to chase the enemy. Because if you don't, you end up like GN, where the boss literally leaving you for 2 seconds can break your entire rotation because you're not generating enough energy. But Augusta doesn't really seem to suffer from this. From the animations that we saw within the livestream, I can see her doing a lot of backsteps and a lot of very large gap crossing. So that means that when it comes to enemies that move a lot, Augusta will completely just ignore their movement and chase them down until the ends of the earth. Now, it doesn't seem like Augusta have that many options for flying enemies like the Sentry Construct. Some of her abilities are in the air, but you very much do still need to use grounded abilities in order to actually use the aerial ones. Which means that while she isn't horrible against flying opponents, she definitely won't have as good of a time there when compared to just a straight up grounded opponent. Another very unique piece of utility that Augusta has to her name is that her ult seems to completely stop all time, while still giving you movement access. This is not really something that I know how we're going to use it in practice yet, but this is a very interesting quality that no other DPS really has to their name, and it has a lot of potential. This ability to completely stop time gives Augusta a very unique opportunity to survey the battlefield and see what's going on. If you can't really see the boss, you're able to look for them. If you're trying to escape a tricky situation, you can just ult and the boss just suddenly stops moving. Things of that nature I can see being exploited in a very unique way. Now, one thing I am a little concerned about is that, does this stop new waves of enemies from spawning in Whimpering Wastes? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that enemies are probably still going to spawn, but it's still a food for thought. Another thing that Augusta has to her disposal is the fact that she's able to shield herself. Because this character wasn't good enough already, why not? Augusta is capable of applying shields to herself thanks to one of her inherent skills, which means that, well, she has a shield, so she's gonna be harder to kill. There really isn't that much to say, but for a character that already has this much utility, being able to shield herself means that it's incredibly hard for this character to die. I can see people bringing Augusta into holograms and just straight up being able to ooga booga the enemy, because, well, they have shields, they have healing, Shorekeeper even gives them a free revive. So honestly, Augusta mains might become some of the most brain-dead players in the entire game, because why think when I get a shield every half second? And then finally we get to the negatives, and honestly I don't really have that much to say here. Augusta seems just like a really well-designed character, but the one flaw that I do have with her is a pretty significant one, which is that Augusta's damage seems to be incredibly backloaded. And by backloaded, I mean that Augusta, while she does do a lot of damage, most of it is nearing the tail end of her rotation. Meaning that if you're trying to fight a boss in something like Tower of Adversity, and it really doesn't have that much HP so you don't need 2 full rotations, Augusta will likely be losing out compared to other DPSs who do more of their damage up front. First, you need to use Augusta's special heavy attacks as well as her skills in order to deal damage to the enemies so you can build up your Majesty stacks. And once you're at 2, you're finally able to use Augusta's ultimate, which will do a very large chunk of Augusta's damage output. The third stage of Augusta's Forte skill will also most likely be the highest damaging one, which means that between the third Forte skill as well as Augusta's second Liberation, a lot of your damage is simply being done in the last 2 seconds of her rotation. This is not some kind of massive gameplay flaw that holds Augusta back or anything. It simply means that within shorter fights, Augusta might see worse performance than other characters like Zani and Carlotta. But I still believe that Augusta is going to be an incredibly powerful DPS in both game modes. So while this is a con for Augusta, I don't think it's a major one. And then there's a nitpick that I have about her. This is not really Augusta's fault, more just Kuro Games' fault, which is that if you want to pull for Augusta, be prepared to not be able to use her on the first day, because she has a new free piece set, and free piece sets are the bane of my existence, because as we all know at this point, they have a limit of how much you can farm them a day. So if you want to use your Augusta day 1, you either really need to get lucky or have a ton of modifiers saved up so you can ensure you get correct pieces. But those are just my thoughts. What do you think of Augusta? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Additionally, if you have any questions, be sure to join my Discord, which is linked in the description. If you just want to see more of me, you can also check out my second channel, where I primarily talk about punishing Grey Raven, but I kinda just make videos about whatever I want to. This is also linked in the description. But that'll be all from me. Peace.